Okay, Jim, I have another question for you. What do you think about the MMA?
Well, that's been a common reoccurring question. Many people want my opinion about it. I'm okay with it. I see it as progressive. I mean, I see why people are doing it and getting outside the bounds of traditional arts. I totally get it. And it's a world of black and white. There's very little question left. When somebody goes down, they're down. Whereas, in the old style, you couldn't really tell sometimes who won and who didn't, because it was point karate. Where here, there's very little question about who did what. And it's brought out some amazing athletes into the field that would never been there before. When you look at the history of the UFC and the Octagon and everything, those used to just be people they were just regular people. They ran a studio or a dojo, and they decided one day they were going to fight. And this was pretty much everybody. And then, by, let's say, 2000, somewhere in there, this started taking another turn. Now young people who had never been in a traditional school of any kind were taking to the mats, learning these mixed martial arts, and that's all they've done. This is their career. In the old days, if you were to fight, you still had your job at the local mill, whatever it was, the hardware store. You operated your studio at night, and that was just about 90% of us. Very few of us. You couldn't really do anything like fight all the time because there was just nothing set up like that. But now that this infrastructure has been accepted by our culture, the UFC and all the rest of this, everything in every country, then this has changed. This has become a profession now. Now people do this for a living, and all they do is for a living. So the standard of the player, at least in the upper echelons, has really improved. And so I'm for it. I think it's good. And I would also like to point out that people in the past, Bruce Tegner, people many times chuckle about that. That guy was a genius on many levels. And he had Jukado, judo and karate mix. So when people point out that mixed martial arts are something new, or like Bruce Lee's Jeet Kune Do was the original mixed martial arts, I see that, I get it, but this has been happening for centuries, for a long time. In our world, like I say, Bruce Tegner was one of the first to blend different martial arts and put them out into the public, see what they did. He wrote books, tons of books, and yeah, some of them were a little corny according to people, but at the same time, he was a pioneer. And even Miyagi-sensei, Goju-Ryu, said that he didn't really know what to call his blend of martial arts. It was his students who later gave it the name Goju-Ryu. Before that, it was just an eclectic blend of things he had learned or been shown in his life, and that he continued to teach. And this also was an early mix of martial arts. To represent Okinawa correctly, Funakoshi also blended martial arts, different forms, styles from the island. People who created things, there really wasn't an art of Aikido or Judo. Those came from Jiu-Jitsu and Aikijitsu. Those were secondary creations by their founders, the great Ueshiba, Jigoro Kano. So it's something that those were created arts. Those were a mix of less than lethal, because the jitsu arts were very lethal. So they take out the lethal, turn it into some acceptable sport level, and there you go. You're almost back into the same cycle of thinking and behavior, only it was long ago, and for various reasons, both political as well as society, what they were doing with it to keep the arts alive in that period of time, especially after the war. So we see that nobody really knocks those arts like judo or aikido, but those were creations based upon something else, a new blend, a new way. And then there were offshoots of all that, of course. And so we see all this type of thinking, you know, that mixed martial arts are something unique and new in a way, but only in perhaps the way that the public, the masses have accepted it due to the media being stronger than ever. But the actual idea of what's been done is nothing new. And that's something that any roughneck would probably speak up, that when they would get in a fight, they would wrestle, they would box, they would bite, they would hit if they could get their hands on something to hit with, like a rock or a beer bottle, because they were roughnecks. They may never have spent one day in a martial arts studio, but they knew how to fight. And fighting always involved all of your tools, rather than the limitations that had been put on us by many arts by saying you can only kick or punch, you can only grapple, throw, you know, sort of things like this, limitations. Just go out there and do it. And that's why I think MMA has been a good thing, is because it's brought that forth. And I think it at some point, if it continues, it will be very similar to the in-depth training one gets in a long-term traditional art. In some cases, perhaps it already is. It is punishing, though. We see that, you know, many martial art masters and practitioners have lifetime careers, whereas in MMA, the career is very much like a meteor. It's bright and powerful. It streaks past you, and then it's gone because the damage is done. The true gladiators. And that's something that people going into the MMA must understand, that this is about the long-term game. And, you know, la Zado, that type of thing. I'll do anything to be the good ball player. Well, sometimes that thing to get the big pump on your bicep, to get that aggressiveness, the drugs they would take back then, it killed many guys. Perhaps it isn't the best to do anything for that short burst of glory. Your long-term game is important, your overall health. And that's, again, an underlying principle that all martial arts share. And I think that's something that needs to be considered whenever you're doing hard impact type fights, games, because it will have an effect long term. But that's the only thing I can say that perhaps could be dangerous or on the negative side of it. But as long as your game, know when to get out of it, you know, you're able to do it, and you know when to get out of that game, I think you're going to be okay. And, you know, you learn your lessons, and it's also a testing ground, a proving ground. So, yeah, I think generally I'm for it about, you know, 85%, and there's a few other things that maybe will get worked out, maybe not. But I think the same could be said for traditional arts. So, as far as that goes, I'm okay with MMA.